Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times, so stick around. So, if you remember last episode, we read Alma chapter 1, in which Alma the Younger, as the new high priest, has to deal with Nehor, which is the first of many false prophets or antichrists or priest crafters or whatever you want to call them. He was bad, and he was spreading bad ideas around Zarahemla, false ideas about salvation, false ideas about his status as a quote-unquote teacher, so on and so forth. He was killed, but his copycats kind of spread throughout the city, but it did eventually get solved. But as you can see in this chapter, it won't stay that way. So let's see what happens as we read Alma chapter 2. And it came to pass, in the commencement of the 5th year of their reign, there began to be a contention among the people, for a certain man, being called Amlici, he being a very cunning man, yea, a wise man as to the wisdom of the world, he being after the order of the man that slew Gideon by the sword, who was executed according to the law. Now this Amlici had, by his cunning, drawn away much people after him, even so much that they began to be very powerful, and they began to endeavor to establish Amlici to be a king over the people. Now this was alarming to the people of the church, and also to all those who had not been drawn away after the persuasions of Amlici, for they knew that according to their law that such things must be established by the voice of the people. Therefore, if it were possible that Amlici should gain the voice of the people, he being a wicked man, would deprive them of their rights and privileges of the church, for it was his intent to destroy the church of God. So now we're in an interesting pickle. So not only is Amlici yet another follower of Nehor that's screwing around with Zarahemla, he's definitely one of the copycats of Nehor. Now he's vying to be king. And the thing is, in Zarahemla, things happen, as it says in verse 3, by the voice of the people. And so if he wins the vote, he will be king. So if he's able to flatter enough of the city to get enough influence in the city, he will be able to take it over, and as it says in verse 4, he will be able to deprive them of their rights and privileges in the church. So the people in the church are scared, because he's doing all this work, flattering and lying to the people, trying to get supporters, trying to get money, trying to build his platform, and overthrow the system of the judges in the first handful of years of its existence. It is the 5th year of the reign of the judges. It's only been a handful of years since this started, and he's trying to overthrow it. And the scary thing is that it might happen through democratic means. However, when Mosiah instituted the reign of the judges, he was really confident that people, most of the time, would choose the right thing. So let's see if Mosiah's confidence was misplaced or not, shall we? And it came to pass that the people assembled themselves together throughout all the land, every man according to his mind, whether it were for or against Amlici, in separate bodies, having much dispute and wonderful contentions one with another. And thus they did assemble themselves together to cast in their voices concerning the matter, and they were laid before the judges. And it came to pass that the voice of the people came against Amlici, that he was not made king over the people. Now this did cause much joy in the hearts of those who were against him, but Amlici did stir up those who were in his favor to anger against those who were not in his favor. And it came to pass that they gathered themselves together and did consecrate Amlici to be their king. Now when Amlici was made king over them, he commanded them that they should take up arms against their brethren, and this he did that he might subject them to him. So, Mosiah's confidence was not misplaced. The people voted correctly. They did not vote Amlici to be their king. This is good, this is a good thing. However, Mosiah may have underestimated the power and the anger and the tenacity of those that are trying to sway the people to make the wrong decision. Now, Amlici has kind of his own faction of supporters, and those supporters have named him to be their king, and now Amlici has told them to go fight their own brethren. So Amlici is inciting what is basically a civil war in Zarahemla right now, because he wants to subjugate all the people of Zarahemla. It literally says at the end of verse 10 that he might subject them to him. That is why he wants to take over the rest of Zarahemla. He wants to subject the people. That is not what kings do. No one should have considered this guy for election. Oh my gosh. Anyways, let's see what the Amlicites do, how far they get in their civil war, what sort of effect they're able to have on the people, and whether or not they will get quashed by the rock star that is Alma the Younger. Now, the people of Amlici were distinguished by the name of Amlici, being called Amlicites, and the remainder were called Nephites, or the people of God. Therefore the people of the Nephites were aware of the intent of the Amlicites, and therefore they did prepare to meet them. Yea, they did arm themselves with swords, and with scimitars, and with bows, and with arrows, and with stones, and with slings, and with all manner of weapons of war of every kind. And thus they were prepared to meet the Amlicites at the time of their coming, and there were appointed captains, and higher captains, and chief captains, according to their numbers. And it came to pass that Amlici did arm his men with all manner of weapons of war of every kind, and he also appointed rulers and leaders over his people to lead them to war against their brethren. And it came to pass that the Amlicites came upon the hill Amnihu, which was east of the river Sidon, which ran by the land of Zarahemla, and there they began to make war with the Nephites. Now Alma, being the chief judge and the governor of the people of Nephi, therefore he went up with his people, yea, with his captains and chief captains, yea, at the head of his armies against the Amlicites to battle. And they began to slay the Amlicites upon the hill east of Sidon. And the Amlicites did contend with the Nephites with great strength, insomuch that many of the Nephites did fall before the Amlicites. Nevertheless, the Lord did strengthen the hand of the Nephites, that they slew the Amlicites with great slaughter, that they began to flee before them. So, the Amlicites have thus far failed. They set up their armies, they had captains, chief captains, whatever. They came to basically the river Sidon, which is east of Zarahemla, and made battle and lost. Because guess what? The Lord is on the Nephites' side. What a surprise. Oh my goodness. But what I noticed about this, just a small detail, is that Alma, who was the chief judge, he led his armies. He did not guide them from his safe throne, his safe palace in Zarahemla. He was in the forefront of his armies. It says in verse 16, yea, at the head of his armies against the Amlicites to battle. So he was in front. He is no coward. I have a very strong feeling that if this were Noah, he would have just left and just sent his armies to do the fighting for him. Or he would have just holed up in his palace. Which, again, I keep using Noah as like the antithesis of a good king, but that's really what he is. He's just a bad king in every single way. And Alma the Younger is the opposite. He is a good king in every single way. He goes in front of his armies to battle. He doesn't just send them to their death from his palace. He joins them in the risk that they are taking to defend the people. And I find that there's great honor in that. I think that's really, really cool. But yeah, so the Amlicites have been beaten back, and now the Nephites are going to chase them a little bit to make sure that they don't continue to try to kill their families. And it came to pass that the Nephites did pursue the Amlicites all that day, and did slay them with much slaughter, insomuch that there were slain of the Amlicites 12,532 souls, and there were slain of the Nephites 6,562 souls. Let's just pause for a minute. Those numbers are insane. Oh my gosh. The Amlicites lost 12,000 people, and the Nephites lost 6,000 people. I guess 12,500 and 6,500 each. That is insane. See, here I was thinking that the Amlicites was like a small faction of like a few hundred people that were just trying to screw over the Zarahemlites. But no, Amlici has a lot of supporters. He has tens of thousands, and that's just in his army. There's likely women and children that support him too that aren't actively fighting the Nephites. There's probably tens of thousands more people that support him. So I feel like the fact that he lost the election was much more of a surprise than we give it credit for. Because in our heads we're like, oh, of course there's more believers in Zarahemla, duh. But given these numbers, it is very possible that it was really close. It was likely like 50-50. I didn't realize how many people he had. It's truly a miracle that he lost that initial election, and even though, yes, that did lead him to attack the Nephites in war, it does mean that he wasn't democratically elected as a king, because that would have been worse than war. So anyways, I'm just blown away by those numbers. That is insane. And it came to pass that when Alma could pursue the Amlicites no longer, he caused that his people should pitch their tents in the valley of Gideon, the valley being called after that Gideon who was slain by the hand of Nehor with a sword. And in this valley the Nephites did pitch their tents for the night. And Alma sent spies to follow the remnant of the Amlicites, that he might know of their plans and their plots, whereby he might guard himself against them, that he might preserve his people from being destroyed. Now those whom he had sent out to watch the camp of the Amlicites were called Zeram, and Amnor, and Manti, and Limher. These were they who went out with their men to watch the camp of the Amlicites. And it came to pass that on the morrow they returned into the camp of the Nephites in great haste, being greatly astonished, and struck with much fear, saying, Behold, we followed the camp of the Amlicites, and to our great astonishment, in the land of Minon, above the land of Zarahemla, in the course of the land of Nephi, we saw a numerous host of the Lamanites, and behold, the Amlicites have joined them. And they are upon our brethren in that land, and they are fleeing before them with their flocks and their wives and their children towards our city. And except we make haste, they obtain possession of our city, and our fathers and our wives and our children be slain. And it came to pass that the people of Nephi took their tents, and departed out of the city of Gideon towards their city, which was the city of Zarahemla. So a moment of appreciation for Alma the Younger's preventative tactics, because he doesn't want to just murder all of the Amlicites. Obviously, they've been to war, they've battled, thousands, tens of thousands of people have died. This is bad. Alma doesn't want to continue this longer than necessary. So he sends spies so that he can defend better against what the Amlicites are doing, and then it turns out, oh, the Amlicites have joined the Lamanites, and they're actually coming to take us over, and if we don't hurry, we won't be able to get back to Zarahemla on time, and Zarahemla will be left defenseless as they get overtaken by the Lamanites. Like, this is high stakes. Currently, Zarahemla is, I'm sure, nearly defenseless, because thousands of people, the whole army, left Zarahemla to go attack the Amlicites. And so, they have to hurry, because the Nephites at the moment just woke up. Like, the spies got back to them in the morning, they had their tents all set up, they were rested and camped for the night. They have to pick up all their stuff and rush back to Zarahemla quickly before all of their families get murdered. Oh my goodness. This is some high drama, you know what I'm saying? And behold, as they were crossing the river Sidon, the Lamanites and the Amlicites, being as numerous almost as it were as the sands of the sea, came upon them to destroy them. Nevertheless, the Nephites, being strengthened by the hand of the Lord, having prayed mightily to him that he would deliver them out of the hands of their enemies, therefore the Lord did hear their cries, and did strengthen them, and the Lamanites and the Amlicites did fall before them. And it came to pass that Alma fought with Amlicite with the sword, face to face, and they did contend mightily one with another. And it came to pass that Alma, being a man of God, exercised with much faith, saying, O Lord, have mercy, and spare my life, that I may be an instrument in thy hands to save and preserve this people. Now when Alma had said these words, he contended again with Amlici, and he was strengthened, insomuch that he slew Amlici with the sword. And he also contended with the king of the Lamanites, but the king of the Lamanites fled back from before Alma, and sent his guards to contend with Alma. But Alma, with his guards, contended with the guards of the king of the Lamanites, until he slew and drove them back. This is how we learn that Alma the Younger is an absolute unit on the battlefield. Oh my gosh. He not only sword fought with Amlici, his rival leader, face to face, and was able to beat him, but also the very king of the Lamanites ran away from him, sent his guards to fight him, and then Alma and his guards killed the king's guards. And so he just killed Amlici, he scared away the king, and him and his guards killed the king's guards. This guy's insane. And also, while he was fighting Amlici, he prayed to God, Father, have mercy on me, so I can be an instrument in thy hands. He is not asking for God to save his life because he wants to keep living. He is asking God to save his life so that he can continue serving. He wants to continue to be an instrument in the hands of God in order to save and preserve his people, and in order to keep them on the right track, and be an example to them. That's so selfless and humble and amazing. Oh my gosh, what a guy. So not only is Alma the Younger an absolute unit with a sword, but also spiritually humble, faithful, righteous, an instrument in the hands of God. This guy's awesome. This guy's insane. This guy's amazing. As if we didn't know that already. Oh my goodness. Every single thing that I hear about Alma, I just become more and more excited about this man. And thus he cleared the ground, or rather the bank, which was on the west of the river Sidon, throwing the bodies of the Lamanites who had been slain into the waters of Sidon, that thereby his people might have room to cross and contend with the Lamanites and the Amlicites on the west side of the river Sidon. And it came to pass that when they had all crossed the river Sidon, that the Lamanites and the Amlicites began to flee before them, notwithstanding they were so numerous that they could not be numbered. And they fled before the Nephites towards the wilderness which was west and north, away beyond the borders of the land, and the Nephites did pursue them with their might, and did slay them. Yea, they were met on every hand, and slain and driven, until they were scattered on the west and on the north, until they had reached the wilderness, which was called Hermounts, and it was a part of the wilderness which was infested by wild and ravenous beasts. And it came to pass that many died in the wilderness of their wounds, and were devoured by those beasts, and also the vultures of the air, and their bones have been found, and have been heaped up on the earth. It sounds like the Nephites made a bridge across the river Sidon with the dead bodies of the Amlicites? Oh my gosh! How metal is that? That's insane. Oh my goodness. And you know what's crazy is when the Lamanites caught up to the Nephites, when they're both kind of chasing each other back to the land of Zarahemla, it was said that the Lamanite army was as numerous as the sands of the sea. There was a host of Lamanites. They outnumbered the Nephites likely 10-1. There were probably endless amounts of Lamanites. However, the Nephites were able to single-handedly get the Lamanites to flee and to die in the wilderness. How extremely jacked do you have to be spiritually to get that to happen? That is insane. Oh my goodness. And also, they didn't even have to worry about getting back to Zarahemla on time anymore because there is no Lamanite army running towards there. There are no more stakes because they killed the stakes. I just can't get over verse 34 where it says, "They threw the bodies of the Lamanites who had been slain into the waters of Sidon, that thereby his people might have room to cross." Whether or not that's actually making a body bridge across the river, that is still insane that in order to get across the river, they had to throw bodies in the river, either to build a bridge, I don't know how deep it was, or just to get them out of the way, just because they're everywhere. This is wild how many dead bodies there probably were. And again, the Nephites were only doing this to stop the Lamanites from slaughtering their family unjustly, from attacking undefended Zarahemla, because that was what they were going to do were they not stopped by the Nephites. The Nephites probably would have been extinguished right then and there had the Nephites not had the power of God on their side and were able to kick out the Lamanite army that were apparently as numerous as the sands of the sea. That cannot be overstated how big of a number that probably is, or at least how big of a number it felt like it was for the Nephites at the time. These were towering odds, and yet, by the rock starness of Alma the Younger and his guards that killed Amlici, scared off the king, and killed the king's guards, and the power of the rest of the Nephites that were likely also faithful and attacking with righteous fervor just in order to defend their families, they were able to get the Lamanites out. Because they weren't doing it for glory, they were doing it to protect their family. And that is the important distinction. So, Alma chapter 2, and we have already killed the second false prophet. So far, we have one false prophet per chapter so far. We'll see if the pattern continues in next chapter. We shall see. But anyways, the standout verse for this chapter is going to be verse 30, which says, "And it came to pass that Alma, being a man of God, being exercised with much faith, cried, saying, O Lord, have mercy and spare my life, that I may be an instrument in thy hands to save and preserve this people." So I've already kind of mentioned this, but it's just such a good verse. Keep in mind, he's doing this in the middle of battle. He's likely saying this prayer in a break in his fight, his sword fight no less, with Amlici face to face. And he thinks that he's gonna lose, and so he's like, Father, please, have mercy on me, let me live, so that I can be an instrument, so that I can serve thy people, so that I can continue supporting this people in building their righteousness and their faith and their humility. Please, I need to lead this people. I imagine that's what he was thinking. He's like, I need to be there as an example to these people. And God was like, yeah, I agree. So I'm going to save your life and I'm going to let you kill off Amlici because you're awesome. Anyways, I just think that's really important to establish the motivations on either side for war, because when you're looking at the war chapters, like, it's generally a sin, or at least it's generally bad, to attack without reason. And it seems sometimes very aggressive that the Nephites chased the Lamanites off into the wilderness and killed them in the wilderness and let their bones get eaten by vultures, etc., etc. But their motivation was so that the Lamanites would have no chance to kill their families, because the Lamanites' plan was to attack Zarahemla when it was completely undefended, and they likely would have killed everyone in the city walls, or at the very least taken them all hostage and treated them badly. So that's why they were so aggressive in making sure the Lamanites would not keep going towards Zarahemla, because they're saving their family. And Alma was also fighting so hard because he wanted to live. He wanted to continue to be a support to the people, and to be an instrument in the hands of God, and to be a bastion of righteousness and faith at the head of his people. That is why they were fighting. They weren't doing it for glory, or power, or anger, or retribution. And that is what really sets apart the Lamanites from the Nephites. Because in the war chapters, both the Lamanites and the Nephites kill a lot of each other. There's a lot of death on both sides. But it's the motivations that really make the difference between the two. And it's when the motivations change that their fortunes change as well, and they aren't as successful in battle. So anyways, it's very cool. We will continue to see how this plays out in the future. So yeah, I think that's going to be the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed. This was a really insane chapter, just trying to envision the stakes and the fact that, like, there was this crazy civil war and there's a whole faction of the Zarahemlites that just left and joined the Lamanites. That is insane. The people of Zarahemla likely lost tens of thousands of people to the Lamanites. Anyways, there's just a few links down in the show notes that I want to point out to you. There is a Let Me Know You Learned link, so if you're going to shoot me a message, be it about whatever you want, so long as it's related to the podcast preferably, you can send me that there. Next, there are 3 different links to access digital versions of the Book of Mormon, so if you don't have your own copy, yes you do. It's right there. Go ahead, read along, it's a good time. Thirdly, we have a quick support the show link, so if you're going to shoot me a few dollars and support what I do as an independent podcast creator, that would be much appreciated as well. And finally, we are on YouTube, so if you're not watching this on YouTube, you could be. You can go and subscribe to the channel down in the description below, and you will be able to listen to it twice a week because it also gets posted there. So, anyways, I hope you have a delightful day, and yeah, that's all I have for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.